Board meeting. Please, no attendees. Thank you very much. All right, let's roll right into this 2023 executive budget program review.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for you and your staff for putting this together. You know, it's always a tough job. We greatly appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you all for taking the time to review the 2024 executive budget. This is the culmination of work by department heads and executive staff or administrative staff to put together a comprehensive budget that looks to meet the needs of every department while accounting for the fiscal constraints that the village is subject to. What you're looking at this evening is, I believe, the 6th iteration of the executive budget. You'll hear me use this analogy several times throughout the night of putting the puzzle pieces together or making the puzzle pieces fit. As information came in and became available to us or was finalized by the state of Wisconsin, or conversations were had at a staff level, different iterations of the executive budget were produced. So from the time department requests were submitted in late August until that October 6th publication date, this document, this 2024 executive budget, was a fluid document. It was adjusting and readjusting and making sure we were looking to meet the needs across the board, as the summary statement states. Really high level glance at the budget, really kind of 6 main points. Balance. The executive budget is balanced expenditures and revenues. That's by law. That's not just our policy, that is by state law. We have to present a balanced budget for the board to consider. Another way to look at it is this budget balances the needs of the entire organization. Not everybody did not get everything they wished. However, everybody got something. And so again, it looks to meet that balance for the entire organization. Compliance with tax levy limits, expenditure restraint program, and our own internal fund balance policy. I will touch on these in greater detail as I go through my presentation. But again, at a 10,000 foot look, here are some primary points. Performance. This budget is packed with maintaining or improving all of our municipal services. We are not losing any municipal services due to the fiscal constraints that we have placed upon us. We are actually looking at over 4 miles of road being improved or replaced under this budget presentation, which is a far cry from the less than a mile of reconstruction when I first came on board in 2016. So great work all around with the approach to that very important need of our community. Responsibility, the tax rate, you know, this is a responsible budget. The tax rate and the tax levy are both lower than the rate of inflation. Yes, they are adjusted upwards, but significantly lower than the rate of inflation. Innovation, staff works hard at utilizing alternative funding sources and how to allocate funds throughout the budget in order to get the best bang for our buck and to meet those needs of the entire organization. And that the organization looks to change in order to provide the highest and best service to the community. This slide here actually walks us through the tax levy that is programmed in the executive budget of about $8.9 million. That is our maximum amount we are able to capture in tax levy by state law. That is a 3.57% increase from last year. Our adjustment to the tax levy is based on the net new construction adjustment. That is an allowable levy adjustment using equalized valuation of new construction minus any removal or demolition of improvements or buildings. And a percentage of that value is applied by the state within a funding formula to calculate the allowable levy increase. Ours in here in the village of Grafton is an allowable increase of about $307,000 of that net new construction valuation to reach that $8.9 million tax levy. That tax levy, collecting that tax levy translates into an overall tax rate for the village of just over $6.03 per $1,000 of value. This is about a 0.75% increase from last year. It's important to note, you probably saw some recent press coverage how the school district's tax rate decreased. Ours would have too if the village used equalized values. The village uses assessed valuations. We have a contracted assessment firm that reviews the valuation of buildings and properties in the village. School districts throughout the state, on the other hand, use equalized value. My theory on that is because generally speaking, school districts will cross multiple municipal boundaries, and therefore using a state equalized value would make sense in the calculation of their tax rate. State equalized value is exactly that. It's a value established by the state, which looks to equalize a home here in Grafton with a home up in Rhinelander, or a home in Green Bay, or a home in Milwaukee, and really get on a level playing field, if you will, a residential value or a commercial value or a manufacturing value. Again, equalized across the state. So school districts will use that equalized tax rate. Municipalities will use an assessed tax rate. Now, to the point, if we used an equalized tax rate, our rate would have actually decreased by over 1.3%. So similar to the school district. However, we use assessed valuation here in the village. Now, I did mention how the rate of inflation has outpaced the tax levy uptick and the tax rate uptick set by the state of Wisconsin. The consumer price index inflation figure is about 5.4%, or about 2% greater than our tax levy adjustment set forth in the executive budget, 4.7% greater than the assessed tax rate, and 6.7% greater than the equalized tax rate. And that's just for your reference. Now, how does that tax rate impact the average home, single family home here in the village? Reached out to the assessor, and an updated figure for the average home value here in Grafton is about $274,000. So because the tax rate is applied per $1,000 of value, you take the 274,000 home value, divide by the 1,000, you get 274. 274 multiplied by the tax rate of just over $6.03. The average property tax bill for a village home, the average village portion of a property tax bill for a home here in Grafton would be $1,653.86. Now, that's an important clarification point as well. A property tax bill actually contains property tax collections from multiple jurisdictions: the village, the county, the school district, MATC, in the state of Wisconsin. So this here, that's $1,600 figure, is village portion of the property tax bill based upon the rate established based upon the levy we are proposing to collect. How does that tax dollar break down when it's applied here to the village? We collect that tax levy. That is our primary source of revenue here in the village, which is not unique to anyone here in Wisconsin. All municipalities are really married to tax levy as their primary source. But how does that translate as far as how is that money used? So approximately 71% of the village portion of the tax bill, or about $1,174, is applied towards the general fund. The general fund includes DPW, police, administration, finance, community development, legal, village board, and so forth. It is by far the largest portion of our budget, and hence the largest allocation goes towards that. The next two close allocations would be fire and EMS, both operations and capital, coming in about 9% of utilization of a tax levy dollar. And capital projects and equipment utilize about 8% of property tax dollars that are collected. And then on down the line, we have library at about 7.5%, debt service at 2%. And then we get into recreation, programming, and aquatics at 1.25%, and parks and open spaces at about 0.25% of a property tax bill collected. It's important to note, rec program and aquatics, those are subsidized by user fees. Thus, only a limited amount of tax levy is applied in that area. Now, as I mentioned, the general fund is the largest portion of the village budget. And just to break out the various types of revenues that go into the general fund for information for the board to consider here this evening. As I mentioned, tax levy is by far the primary source of revenue. And again, this is not unique to Grafton. All municipalities in the state of Wisconsin are really married up to tax levy as their primary source of revenue, because that is how our state really is formed and functions with regards to funding municipalities. State shared revenue is a secondary. User fees like licenses and sales taxes, those are secondary, where in other states you'll see much more aggressive licensure for cars, registration for cars and vehicles, much more aggressive out east versus here in the Midwest. That's a different way of funding municipal operations, whereas in Wisconsin it is primarily property tax levy. Intergovernmental revenues, those include primarily state shared revenue. The intergovernmental charges or the licenses and permits are pretty explanatory. Those are building permits, liquor licenses, so on and so forth. Fines and forfeitures, pretty straightforward as well. Charges for service include such things as, and now I just lost my place in my notes, pardon me. Whereby the municipality passes along charges to a developer. Intergovernmental charges would be such things as collecting inspection dollars from Saukville for building permits, fire and EMS payments for service to the town of Grafton, payments from the school district for the school resource officer position. Miscellaneous revenues, interest income is pretty straightforward as well. Thankfully, we've had a very good year this year. The executive budget does program, again, improved interest income over prior years, however, not to the extent we're realizing this year. We do not see the interest income continuing at the rapid pace of growth it is right now. We do work hard at being very conservative with revenue forecasts. So you will see that in the budget as far as interest income. It does uptick from prior years, however, not to the extent we're going to see here in 2023. Miscellaneous revenues include such things as pilot payments, park rentals, donations, and the recycling fee that is listed on the tax bill. Other financing sources include such things as, or really is the transfer of funds from the Woodlawn Cemetery Fund back into the general fund per village code. The executive budget does program fund balance. This has been an ongoing practice for quite some time. That said, we do so very responsibly. We are down in the neighborhood of programming about $509,000 of fund balance in the 2024 budget. This is down from about 1.1 million several years ago. So long story short, this is a very responsible way of minding the gap, if you will. We do primarily plug this in as a contingency. It is not necessarily intended to be utilized unless absolutely needed, but it does cover unique one-time expenditures that are either unplanned or unforeseen. That said, we are well in accord. We currently sit at about 30.5%, which is in excess of the 25% threshold. So to explain that a little bit further, the policy threshold states that the village shall maintain a minimum amount of fund balance equal to 25% of general fund expenditures. And right now we currently sit at about just over 30%. So we're well in compliance with that internal policy. Moving into another funding category, federal ARPA dollars. This was in accord with recent village board action. We have allocations to utilize the remainder of our federally provided American Rescue Plan Act dollars. The Highway 60 Bridge Lights project, pardon the clip art, but the PD locker room plumbing upgrades, that is specifically spelled out here in the budget to be combined with $10,000 of Act 12 dollars to specifically address that plumbing issue within the building. The budget basically looks to break apart that project, if you will, into various stages. The lockers and the benches and other amenities will need to be rescoped. However, the plumbing is a significant issue that I wanted to make sure was addressed within the confines of the budget. Veterans Park Pavilion, that allocation was upticked with the recent village board action. And then we applied ARPA funds to the Lime Kiln paving, parking lot paving project to help free up tax levy in other areas of the budget. Now, the Act 12 or the Community Municipal Aid funds, The state legislation adopted Act 12 with providing additional shared revenue from the state of Wisconsin. However, the legislation also put very specific restrictions on the use of these funds. Police, fire, EMS, dispatch, transportation, or DPW. We do not have dispatch, so I look to allocate these funds across the remaining specific line items listed within the legislation to help the organization as a whole. As I mentioned, the locker room plumbing project would use some of these funds, but also the firing range improvements would look to have some of these funds allocated as well. Fire and EMS, we're looking to help subsidize operational support for the department while freeing up a little bit of tax levy for use within the budget. Then also transportation or DPW purposes, looking to fund the road maintenance program. The road maintenance program is that heavy duty seal coating or micro sealing of the roads that we have carried out the last 2 or 3 years now in conjunction with the road reconstruction program, really making good progress with regards to maintaining and improving our roads here in the village. So that $302,904 allocation is our total allocation from the state of Wisconsin, and it is broken out in accord with the legislative restrictions to help benefit our entire organization here in Grafton. A quick budget fact sheet, really to give an overview of the budget as a whole in the primary program areas. Across the entire budget, you'll notice there's increased costs of goods and services that are realized. That speaks to some of the upticks here that are shown on the chart. A 2% cost of living adjustment is programmed for non-represented staff. Then with regards to the general fund, both elections and legal services have been adjusted upward. We have a presidential election year coming up, and just with the litigious state of our society, we did adjust legal costs as well. Staffing is built into the general fund across multiple areas within the general fund. I will get into it in greater detail on my next slide. However, that includes a full-time custodian, an assistant engineer, and a recreation supervisor position here that would be within the general fund. The stormwater budget within the general fund does see an increase as well. And we also see a increase in tax levy contributed to the recreation and aquatics fund. Within the special revenue funds, levy is reduced, but overall funding support increases for the fire department with Act 12 contribution, with Act 12 dollars, as well as increased contributions from Saukville and the town of Grafton. You will notice the K-9 special revenue fund was discontinued, as all expenses minus the staffing are now handled directly by the foundation. Therefore, we do not need to track that in our budget. We had created that account for proper accounting purposes. However, none of those dollars hit village coffers, as the expenses are handled directly by the nonprofit foundation. Moving into the next category of debt service funding, kind of a unique line here. You see a 2.82% decrease in overall debt service expense. However, a 15% increase in levy required. That is because tax incremental financing district related debt is rolling off. So our overall amount of debt is dropping, but we have borrowed for roads, and therefore our tax levy associated debt, that levy required, is increasing. So our overall debt is dropping, but the levy required to make debt payments is increasing slightly because of the fact that the debt we have taken on recently is not related to the tax incremental financing districts, where that debt is paid through the increment captured within that district. Capital improvements and funds, all of the needs are met here. We do see an increase in both levy required, but also just overall expenses there. That encompasses the projects as presented, including the road program. However, the levy required was mitigated because the 2024 budget does call for a borrowing for roads. Fiduciary fund expense is the transfer of interest earnings into the general fund. The fiduciary fund is the Woodlawn Cemetery Trust account. By village code, half of the lot sale proceeds are placed in this fund and the other half in a special revenue fund to cover the cost of operating the cemetery. The interest transfer supports some of the general fund Woodlawn Cemetery expenses, which is why you see they're small numbers, so that slight change does show a larger percent, but that is exactly what a fiduciary fund expense is, and to explain that percentage change. The proprietary funds, those are our utilities. We're seeing a slight dip in overall expenses, primarily due to reduced maintenance project expenses as a whole. So the total tax levy up by about 3.75% to address a total expenditure increase across the budget of about 7.76%. Staffing, as I mentioned, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into this. Requested by the departments is listed on the left-hand side: an assistant engineer, a recreation supervisor, a couple of police officers, a school resource officer, 3 firefighter paramedics, and a custodian. After looking at what we were able to accomplish, as well financially speaking, as well as the needs of the organization and how we can best serve the community, what is built into and included within the 2024 executive budget is an assistant engineer. That position calls for a reclassifying of the engineering tech 1 position. That was something that was created about a year ago, where we were hoping to catch lightning in a bottle, where we could have a hybrid position of someone who could go out and help with surveying and inspections, engineering, but also hop in a plow or pour concrete. Really that hybrid between engineering and crew person. Frankly, with the market being what it is and the development going on that's happening throughout the state, engineering is tough to find. If somebody wants to go be an engineer, they don't want to bother driving a snowplow or pouring concrete. They want to be an engineer. So despite 2 or 3, I believe 2 different attempts at recruiting for that position, we were unsuccessful. That said, we're going to look to, as an offset for the creation of this assistant engineer, the engineering tech, reclassify that as a DPW crew person. So that's an existing position we would reclassify to help create some cost savings to apply towards the assistant engineer position. We're also looking for the ability to bring some of the design and inspection work back in-house. Over the last several years, even despite this summer's unique circumstances, even prior to this summer, we had contracted help with design and on-site inspection. That is what the village pays for. Now, if the contracted help is out on a private project, that's billed out to the developer. We do not incur those costs. However, we have had to have engineering assistance with inspection and design work on our own in-house projects, and we're going to look to bring some of that back in-house to help offset the creation of this assistant engineer position. Just an interesting fact, we have not added engineering staff since 1994, despite tripling the amount of infrastructure here in the village. We have added and or replaced at a staggering amount, and we have not added staff to that primary area in order to assist with that responsibility. Another item or another position added into the executive budget is the creation of a recreation supervisor. This was a difficult decision-making process that took some time to reach an idea on how to best staff a department and move that department forward in providing the highest and best service to our customers, being the constituents and the residents. The creation of a recreation supervisor does call for the elimination of the aquatic supervisor and the part-time office assistant positions that are currently on the organizational chart. Those wages, about $41,000, $42,000, would be applied towards the creation of the recreation supervisor position and offset that initial cost. This is about 2/3 of that entire position. That said, right now we currently have 1 recreation supervisor who oversees the senior center, adult programming, youth programming, and aquatics. With the creation of this second recreation supervisor, we're going to look to divide and conquer to be able to provide a higher and better level of service with regards to programming, especially in the areas of youth programming and aquatics. Our existing recreation supervisor would remain focused on the senior center and adult programming, whereas youth programming and aquatics would go over to the new recreation supervisor position that is included within the budget. So again, we've received a lot of feedback with regards to, especially in the area of aquatics, which would help us focus and providing additional programming, which again, that revenue builds over time, which again will help with the funding of this position. Similar to the 2023 budget, a school resource officer is programmed. This is subject to a successful COPS grant, receipt of a successful COPS grant, and a cost sharing with the school district. Again, very similar situation as to the 2023 budget. We unfortunately did not receive a COPS grant in 2023. Therefore, the program stalled. We are going to make another run at it in 2024 as set forth in the budget. A fire captain position is included within the budget. It is set forth to be funded by Ozaukee County ARPA funds. That position was recently approved by Finance and Village Board to move forward. And then a full-time custodian. Basically, the offset for the creation of that position would be tax levy via discontinued service contract. As the discussions we've had will note, we are struggling with the quality of workmanship provided by our contracted cleaners. Therefore, we are looking at creation of a full-time custodian who will be shared amongst the various facilities, have on-site contact and direct supervision to be able to provide a better service to our organization. Capital projects and equipment. We are looking at about 1.2 miles of roads being reconstructed. That is a full tear out and rebuild. And that accompanies the about 3 miles, I believe, of road resurfacing, that road maintenance program that I have plugged into the budget under the Act 12 dollars in the general fund. So again, we're looking at about 4 miles worth of roads being either completely rebuilt or improved here in the village, which is a fantastic step forward. The project, the capital project fund also calls for a cost sharing of traffic signals at Falls and Port. This is to be borrowed funds and cost sharing with the adjacent properties and the town of Grafton and the Ozaukee County. We are going to look to repave the public parking lot located between 12th and 13th Avenue. The funding source would be part of that borrowing as well. And then overhead doors, the replacement at the fire department as they are reaching the end of their useful life and are in need of replacement. All of the equipment needs set forth in requests have been met. The police fleet program continues. We have 2 new leased police vehicles that is pre-committed. We did take action to place that order in advance to get those in 2024. Similar with a recent Board of Public Works and Village Board action on a 10-yard dump truck with a plow wing. The 2 refurbished ambulances and a Chevy Tahoe purchased for the fire department. Those are all pre-committed funds that are built into the 2024 budget. A masonry truck for the Public Works Department, the continuation of the payments for the street sweeper, computer replacements, and police department equipment such as vests, shields, tasers, and in-squad equipment. The chart I have on this page is pretty important. That shows the trend of our overall road rating here in the village. Every other year, Director Thomas travels every inch of the village and grades out the roads and submits those scores to the state of Wisconsin. That helps the state keep our inventory of roads, whether or not it impacts our transportation aids, that sometimes plays into it as well. But at the end of the day, what this chart shows is since 2017, really when we started implementing this hybrid process of not only reconstructing, but reconstructing and this heavy duty seal coating, this microchip sealing, that hybrid approach to roads, we're actually increasing the overall quality of roads here in the village, which is a fantastic thing because that was one of the big challenges both Amber and I faced walking into this organization back in 2016. So just a great innovative approach by staff, and our efforts are paying off with real live data to show. Another part of the budget are the proprietary funds, the water and wastewater utilities. These are unique in that they in a sense operate as their own private business where customers pay for a product or service. User fees, not tax levy, user fees fund both of the utilities. That said, both are in great shape with regards to how they have the 2024 budget presented, where there is a net operating income for both utilities shown at the end of the year. Thus, revenues exceed expenses. and so therefore they are in great shape. There is a borrowing of about $3 million proposed for infrastructure projects as we see the road program digressing from matching up what roads we reconstruct with the utility infrastructure underneath. For many, many years, we worked very hard. Bad road, bad utilities underneath, we're doing that. But now as I don't want to jinx this, but as we're getting caught up, so to speak, and I want to emphasize caught up, we're making progress. As we're making progress, we're starting to see where roads are deteriorating, but the utilities underneath, that infrastructure is in good shape. So the road itself will be done, not both. There's no need to replace both. Other areas where the utility infrastructure is in bad shape, but the road up above is in good shape. Unfortunately for the utility, when that happens, that's a full project where they're replacing not only utilities underneath, but they're bearing the cost of the road replacement as well. So that said, there is a borrowing for infrastructure projects programmed within the utility budget. Final numbers on that are obviously dependent upon how bids come in, but that is what we have programmed. That said, as you can see with the net operating income illustrated by both utilities, not only is the day-to-day management of those funds in great shape, but also the responsible management of the debt service. As you know, we have the ongoing payments for the Headworks building at the utility, and that's a significant cost. So that responsible management of not only day-to-day operations, but the ongoing debt service is proved out here, where we are realizing a significant net operating income on both sides of the house within the utility. Tax incremental financing districts. This is a unique part of our budget as well. The village has 3 active tax incremental financing districts. That is in a nutshell, whereby a district is created whereby the valuation within that district, as it increases, that base value of taxes or tax levy is still allocated out to the various jurisdictions. However, as the valuation grows within the district, the village is able to capture that difference and help pay for improvements, whether it be redevelopment projects, whether it be infrastructure projects, what have you. So we have 3 active TIF districts. We're looking at about $2.7 million of increment generated. It is important to note that tax incremental financing district number 5, that increment, which is the I-43, the marketplace, helps to offset debt service being paid by tax incremental financing district number 3. This is allowable by law. This has been an ongoing practice here in the village, and that practice does continue here. That said, all 3 districts are slated to close with positive balances, therefore in the favor of the village, with closure dates ranging between 2027 and 2033. What's important to know here is as these districts close with that improved value or increased value rather, we're actually able to capture additional levy upon that closure. Unfortunately, recently the state of Wisconsin taketh away. It used to be where we captured all of that increased value and levy. Now it's 50%. The state came through and said, nope, we are governing what the municipality can capture out of utilization of TIF districts by 50%. So it will be nice when we realize it, but not as nice as it was about 5 or 6 years ago. The intention here, as these close out, will be to utilize that new levy in the future to either partially or completely move away from borrowing for roads. That is the intention here. However, in the meantime, with the cost of materials and just labor in general, in order to actually make headway within road improvements here in the village, the borrowing is a necessary facet. Our next steps here as we look at our budget process, if needed, we are able to convene and schedule a budget workshop number 2 next Monday. November 6th will be the public hearing, which provides for public comment. Then we move to November 20th, which is the adoption or formal action on the 2024 budget and the associated tax rate. With that, we get that information out to the printing firm, and property tax bills go out in the mail by December 5th. Thank you very much all for letting me walk through the presentation this evening.
Very good. Thank you, Josie. I appreciate that. So here's what we're going to go to next are essentially questions that we as trustees may have towards this. I just want to make sure everybody's aware that we have X amount of dollars to spend, and that's it. And we look to be able to use that dollar amount to be able to our best practices to be able to make sure that we fund all of government operations moving forward. I think that there are a lot of folks here who would want more. I think we all would want more. I think we would all like to be able to have more fun. But I think in this situation, and with previous years, we essentially have is we have a budget presented in front of us. And at that point in time, we look to work in concert with the staff to be able to come up with the best program we can have. So I know that not everybody's going to be happy with what's allocated to their departments. However, there are a couple of things we need to keep in mind. As trustees, we've been part of these committees that have heard the arguments from the staff. We've gone through that at committee level. And now what we have in front of us is a plan, which is great. However, just a real idea here, we all work together. And if we think that something else needs to be changed in this budget, we also have to realize that if we add something here, we're gonna end up taking something away from something else. And all I ask that you do is keep an open mind on this and help us solve that problem. So with that discussion about the budget in general, questions? Lisa.
I have a couple of questions, comments. We had a good discussion at Public Works last week, and we talked about roads, which seems to be a big topic of importance for the village. And we noted that you had given Public Works 1.2 miles borrowing for that.
Mm-hmm.
And Amber talked about the great condition that our roads are starting to show.
Yes.
For a number of different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and Dave, you can weigh in too, and Clark, and we talked about possibly it would be great if we could try to get that up to 1.5 miles for 2024. Thinking maybe some of that could happen if we reallocated some funds from ARPA, if we were able to use some of the extra 5% in the fund balance, because we do have 30.5% there. So that was something that we had talked about.
And if I can chime in on that, the reason why we were looking for the increase was, if we did, I think it was 2 miles of road per year,
Mhm.
which we're not even asking for at this point.
Right.
It would take 30 years to complete the entire village of Grafton,
Mhm.
but about 60 miles with the roads that we have.
Mhm.
Granted, we're adding the coating to
Yeah.
help build up some of those roads, but by increasing up to a mile and a half gives us a chance to catch up to those roads, that
Sure.
are gonna be deteriorating. So that's, just wanted to add that.
I would offer to the board, with that, ARPA is a very scarce resource, and I think the projects identified by board action are good ones. The fund balance, I really don't want to get much closer to that 25% than we are. Just that's my own selfish financial thought process. I would actually offer building in additional borrowing to reach the 1.5 million and work with our contracted design firm to get to that 1.5 mile roadway. I would look to offer within the budget borrowing of additional funds to reach that 1.5 mile threshold.
That seems to be like a reasonable idea here, because I think we do hear that folks have concerns about the roads. Just having a clock in the back of your car and going over some of the roads, you really hear how bad the roads are. So I think that's something that we could, maybe all agree upon in consensus? That might be a good idea to move forward with.
As part of potentially getting there, I might offer the parking lot at 12th and 13th, the $55,000 or so that are related to that. I would prefer to see that funding go toward the roads so that we're not borrowing above and beyond that, given the high interest rate environment that we're in that affects us borrowing wise as well.
I appreciate that, and that does make sense. However, we received multiple complaints from multiple businesses downtown regarding the complaints of the condition of that parking lot with regards to chunks of asphalt literally getting thrown at buildings when we plow because it's coming up. And part of that project, we are going to look to establish lighting for safety reasons within that parking lot as well. That is our justification for it. However, if the board feels that reallocation is warranted, I understand the decision lies with the board, but just to help spell out what our thought process behind the allocation was for that project.
So I think with that, thank you very much, Clark. I think we have consensus that we have some room to borrow, to maybe get us a little more roads, and Amber will go back to the table if we get that taken care of and find some other roads. I'm sure we have some roads over there that could be redone.
Absolutely.
So, okay, great. Lisa, you have another one?
Yep. So Fire Protection and Rescue Fund. On page 50, I noted that the fund is budgeted to use $194,000 of fund balance in 2024. This is planned use of fund balance as a referendum for the consolidation of the fire and rescue. So is that coming out of the fire department's account? And if that's being used for the referendum only, is that how I understand that paragraph?
For the referendum, what you mean for?
Well, again, I want to understand this paragraph.
I think that's just a clumsy sentence. What it is, yes, we're programming the use of fund balance within the Special Revenue Fire Protection and Rescue Fund. But we're doing so confidently and responsibly because we are eyeing a referendum towards consolidation as a next step. So as part of the operations for 2024, yes, fund balance would be used. However, that is for the operations in 2024. It is not for the referendum itself. No, that is simply just a clumsily worded sentence.
Okay. And along with that, on page 198 for Special Revenue Fund Fire Protection, I did notice that the amount of general property taxes for 23, approximately $740,000 adopted and estimated, and requested 797, and it looks like you're authorizing less by about $52,000, down to 687. Now, I do see that you gave them a portion of special revenue, state shared revenue of 74,000. But I think they rely on that amount from general property taxes. I would rather have seen that same amount going forward to 24. I worry that that's not enough money. I worry about the referendum, possibly not passing. And then they're out that little bit of money, because I know we're basically waiting until the referendum to try to figure out personnel costs, everything. So that's a little worrisome to me.
Sure.
I'm assuming part of this is all related to the referendum, and then, of course, the bigger question is, what is our plan if the referendum fails?
Mhm.
So that's one of my
Sure.
questions there.
Well, I guess I'll work from the first point of regarding the tax levy support. Yes, the tax levy support drops. However, the overall funding and support of the department is up about 2.5%. Now, what we see are increased fees and contributions from the town of Grafton as well as the village of Saukville, and then the Act 12 money as well. That tax levy was programmed elsewhere within the budget throughout the general fund. Again, trying to back away from the reliance on tax levy within the fire protection fund. As a note, special revenue funds in its purest form should not require tax levy. However, our reality is they do. The swimming pool cannot support itself on user fees alone. The fire department cannot support itself on ambulance fees and contracted contributions alone. That said, the overall support does go up, like I mentioned, and that's why I wanted to make sure to move that Act 12 money in there to make them whole as we look towards significant changes in the future. Now, the other point of if the referendum fails, absolutely, there's a lot of legwork to be done. We have not only the existing fire department operations to fund, but we also have Ozaukee County grant funded positions, a newly created captain position that we will have to fund as well. And that is absolutely something that will require a couple of meetings worth of discussions on how to move these puzzle pieces to address that. That said, part of the reason, as I mentioned with my discussion about staffing changes, I did not want to add more to the department right at this point in time. We already have a commitment that's forthcoming with regards to those ARPA funded positions. Adding more at this time would frankly, I believe, would be irresponsible. I get it, there's a need, but there's also mutual aid, and we are, I believe, ahead of the curve a bit with regards to that full-time positions. And I believe strongly that we are in a good position to make a very good case to the general public about a referendum regarding a consolidation with Saukville and subsequent staffing increases. That is forthcoming. That is not a part of this 2024 budget per se. The service contracts, yes, those are built in here that we discussed with that recent referendum resolution, but additional staffing is not built into the fire department budget right now.
Okay, and Lisa, I'm sure you have other
I just
questions.
have two more.
Two more. Let's see if anybody else has
Sure.
questions. We'll
Sure.
come back to you. Okay, you done? Dave, any questions?
I do not.
Mary Pat?
I'm not ready this moment.
Jim?
I wanted to go over numbers at the library. Now, I know that's kind of a separate entity, Jesse. I called the library director this morning.
What page are you on, Jim?
185?
184.
Oh, 184.
That's not special revenue fund library. But I didn't hear back from her until just before meeting time. And my concern was, under expenditures, personnel went from 629 to 691. And I was wondering what the explanation for that approximately $60,000 increase was.
Well, when we're looking at budget, we look at budget to budget. The 629, why it's so low is mainly because of open positions that weren't filled during the year. So that's why it's 629. If they were fully staffed, it would have been $660,000 roughly. So 34,000 of that is unfilled positions throughout the year. And we also
So we
had,
lose you. What happened?
There was a teen librarian position that had been open since Memorial Day. That is just going to be funded now. There's also going to be a cost difference between the wage rate John was at versus the wage rate our current director is at.
And it wasn't, when did Amanda start?
January.
January, so
We budgeted basically really close to John's salary and
Yeah.
she was offered that full salary.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that's what it was.
Yeah, it's mostly, and then part of it would be, I believe she had built in a 2% pay increase, similar to what Jesse has requested for other village departments.
And being a longtime member of Park and Rec, the aquatic situation / part-time position being eliminated, I have a problem with that. And a dedicated employee who's been here 15 years plus is all of a sudden at the end of the year gonna be out of a job. I don't like the way that was handled. This new position, I guess, is gonna fill her vacancy to a certain extent, correct?
Yes, right. The job duties of both the part-time office assistant and the aquatics manager would be spread out primarily to the new rec supervisor position. But yes, at busy times at the counter, there will be 3 full-time people in the office to be able to help at the counter. It will provide for additional programming support, which the department needs, I believe, with feedback from residents with regards to the want and need of more aquatic focused programming. I think this new full-time position will fill that need as well. That is also part of the justification. So yes, it is a difficult decision. It is not an easy decision to restructure. But I think to move the department forward and provide a higher level of service to the residents, I believe it is necessary. And that is why it is proposed here in the budget.
And I was wondering if that current part-time employee was offered something else in its place or a different position of some sort.
If if there's an
Thanks
opening,
for everything.
if there's an opening, she's free to apply. But right now we do not have an opening, so no, there was no offer made.
Any other questions, Jim?
No.
Okay, very good. Amy?
Okay, I have a clarification question, Paul, on page 14. On the chart. For the actual allocation. Under your prior range, we have 63,000 listed, but on page 21, it says 66,000. So I just wanted to clarify which dollar amount is correct.
It's a
On page
60, it's
21
a
in the
63, it's a
bottom.
60 amount Jesse identified in his presentation.
Okay,
63.
it is
Yeah.
the 63.
Yep, yep.
Okay, so
We'll
that's
make
it
that
there,
change.
and then on the bottom. Okay.
Yes, we'll make that change on page
Um,
21.
And then my next question is page 15, the second bullet point from the bottom about the additional school resource officer. How much does the high school pay towards that position?
It is a percentage of a percentage. So generally speaking, the school resource officer is in the schools 60% of the year. And it is a percentage of that 60% that the school district pays. My apologies, I don't have a contract in front of me. I don't recall the specific cost share, but
And is that a contract that they have signed or
It is.
we've signed?
it is a cost sharing agreement. Yep,
Have we ever gone back to them to negotiate that?
we have not.
I think that's something we're gonna look into, this year, as we move forward with this.
So I understand that the second resource officer will only happen if we get that grant.
Correct.
And have you had a conversation with Chief Caponero about the grant process?
That is part of the staff level discussions we had. So we get all of the requests and then we vet it out as staff. And I was very upfront with the chief saying that this would be the process. Basically, we would carry over the 2023 proposal into 24. And he would have to go after that grant. As you can see in the budget, it is only funded for partial year because the grant cycle goes through the first part of the year. And thus we would look to have the second SRO in place by August-ish. With funding of that COPS grant, or award of that COPS grant. That said, we do have that policy in place as well that we adopted, whereby any grant applications need to be vetted by finance and myself prior to going out the door.
On page 127, there's listed patrol officers as, which I really think it should say police officers, they're not just patrol. As 13. Is that the correct amount, Chief Caponero, or is it 11?
In patrol, we have 11. The total number that's listed there as 13 would be.
Chief, I'm really having a hard time hearing you. Can you project a little more?
Yeah, sorry. So we have 11 assigned to patrol right now. The other two are, well, I say patrol officers, police officers, not sergeants, are 11 assigned to patrol. And then we have 2 in detectives. So we have 2 criminal investigators that are in there. So those 2 are also considered under that patrol officer number. So they technically, that should be police officers, not patrol officers, not all of them are assigned to patrol.
So what we can do is break that out with 11 police officers and 2 detectives. That would be the 13.
And then Chief Caponero, can you tell me when the last time was it you added any police officers to your staff?
Going back through history, the police department added, through a COPS grant, 1 position, I believe that was in 2013, right? It was a rehire of a position they lost. To adding a new position to the police department, they have not added any new positions to the police department since 2000.
And what would the K-9 officer be considered?
That's my next question, thank you.
Canine officers, well, the handler is, part of the authorized sworn 22. The dog is a new addition, so technically the dog would be considered
So essentially, the K-9 handler is an additional officer, although not a patrol officer or police officer.
Yeah, she's assigned to patrol because she's assigned to a ship, correct. Okay.
So then back to the school resource officer, Jesse, did Chief Caponero explain to you that it's highly unlikely that that grant is going to come through for us because it goes to larger municipalities, larger cities?
And I explained to him he's gonna have to do the best he can with that application because that is how we can make it financially work. We understand there is a need, however, that is a need to frankly serve the better part of a year, another jurisdiction, not just the village. So I felt the prioritization of the adding of an allocation of resources towards adding staff was what I set forth, which is why I carried over the 2023 proposal of a COPS grant to work towards the funding of the SRO.
Okay, just a quick heads up here. We're at 6 o'clock here and I would not really like to have another meeting on Monday unless we feel we need to have one. Would be okay if we extend this another 10 minutes and then discern whether or not we need to have another budget workshop.
Sure.
Would that be okay?
Yeah, and I
Okay,
would like
let's
to finish my
extend.
thought
Yep,
process.
thank you.
Thank you. I feel it's a disadvantage that we put something in there that we pretty much know we're not gonna get because it's,
We don't know that.
he's the professional and that's what he's telling
No,
us,
that's
that
fair.
we have to use, we use the professionalism of PDW and everybody else
Mhm.
in those categories. I mean,
Sure.
I just feel that we're setting it up to fail. I would like us to see, and I know, Mr. President, you tell us to find the workaround, but I am not the professional with the numbers. That's Jesse and mostly Paul. So I would ask that they find some way to try to figure out how we can get that second resource officer, since we have not added staff for 10+ years. And the schools are increasing and we see a huge amount of mental health issues in our schools. I think the community would definitely say yes to wanting a second resource officer, and I would like to find us a way to make that happen.
Off the cuff, knee jerk reaction, I believe it would be a capital expenditure in order to make up the dollar amount for a fully funded staff person. That would be my initial thoughts, but it's something we can look into.
Well, I certainly think, and just in discussing this as well, certainly we can go with, we certainly go back to the school district as well. And ask them what they're willing to fund for this above and beyond what we can normally provide, if that's what in fact they want. And I did, as we went through what took place last year at the end of the school year, I think everybody was clamoring for an SRO. If in fact the school district does want an SRO, maybe that's the discussion we need to have at the joint meeting coming up next week, to say, look, this is something that you may need to fund. So we can certainly go back to them and ask them.
Can I add one more thing? There are other grants out there other than the COPS grant that we can apply for. So we're not limited solely to the COPS grant. So I just want to throw that out there because we do have other available resources available to us through other federal grants as well.
Thank you.
Amy,
And Clark, or just to respond to Amy's question on the share that the school currently pays or that would pay. Right now, they put, based on the officers assigned, his salary and benefits is roughly, the school contributes roughly $42,000.
I'm sorry, question.
I have no major questions at the time. I'm just concerned longer term, as Lisa mentioned, about what happens if the fire department referendum does not pass. And overall, I see the declining buffer that we have in our funds relative to that, or our reserves relative to our 25% threshold. It was 35%, now we're down to around 30%. And so I struggle with the using programming fund balance for much more than what it is programmed there for.
Fair.
Thank you. I think we're all concerned about that. I think we have a lot of concerns about how we can raise additional funds to be able to support the needs of the community. And I too am concerned with what could happen with the fire department. That's why we have to do a really good job educating the community on that we need a full-time department and with the referendum, which will be coming up. So thank you. Lisa, back to you.
Okay, yes, my last two quick questions. I did have a question too, Amy, about the police department SRO, position. Did we apply this year for next year for that grant, chief? That, cost grant?
No, the COP grant was applied last year for last year's budget, so for it would have been for 2023.
For 2023, right.
Correct. The other position, they have not announced that yet for the new grant funding, so it won't open up till likely the spring of next year.
And that would be though for the following year?
That would be for the following 3 years, because it's a 3-year grant.
Right, because I did look online and see that it's closed already for this next year.
Yes, correct.
Because when you worked on it last time, you started in the late spring. So it's too bad we missed that window for next year with that grant. I wish that, we could have jumped on that. I would agree to try to get that money from the schools. I just think that's super important for our community. Many other communities, we had that information that showed us many communities the schools provide all the money. Justin, my one question about the police department budget, again, I'm just confused. I want to make sure, are we counting the K-9 as an officer? And are we kind of planning on that second SRO? Because it looks like on page 124, police department total says 35. And I could see that if we're counting the K-9 as an officer, and if we're planning on that second SRO, but I think,
We do count the K-9.
okay.
Yep, yeah, technically the dog is a sworn officer.
Yeah,
Yep,
the dog
yep.
is a police officer, so yes,
So then is the 35th spot then, is that the SRO?
correct.
Okay, so
It's probably, previously we had 33 total
Right.
organization.
right,
The 35th would be including that SRO, if we got that,
okay, so 34 firm right now with the K-9,
That's correct.
35, hopefully we get an SRO.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure, because that's good. And then the other thing is, on page 130, we're looking at the expenses for salaries and wages for the police department. I just want to make sure this is right. Looks like the 2024 executive salaries and wages is up by about 250,000 from the estimated 2023. Is that accidentally left in there for the request for officers?
That's a 2024 requested number, is the request for additional officers. The 2023 estimated is the year end, what we expect, following the myriad of staffing
Okay,
anomalies that, the police department has.
okay, so that's less
experienced.
than normal.
Yep.
So really the 1,000,000.9 is a little above 1.8 from 2023 adopted.
Yes,
Once we're up to full staff with benefits.
yes.
Okay,
Includes our union step increases,
Yep.
where
okay.
for the other departments, we put that in wage reserve, so this looks a little bit
Okay,
different.
thank you. And just my last thing, and I was concerned about the elimination of that park and rec position. I do see that we're kind of piecemealing a new position from 3 different departments: community enrichment, aquatic budget, recreation fund. I think 2.35 and 1.30. I know that we've been looking at something like this position for a few years, something similar to this. I don't like the way it occurred, and I'm assuming any of these new positions will come to finance anyway.
Yes.
Create the job description, yes.
Yep.
Yep.
So I do not like the fact that years back, we did eliminate dispatch positions, 6 of them, I believe.
Mhm.
And those people got to stay in-house. We found other duties for them to do.
It's not that we found other duties, they had other duties,
There were other things that they could do. But
because they were already
But a
doing them,
majority, right, but they lost all their dispatch duties,
and their pay was reduced.
right? So I do not like the fact that we have eliminated this position with somebody in the position and we're not looking for a spot for that person. So I don't know how that happened. I found out accidentally about this. So I I don't like that. I don't like this position and how it's been put together by somebody else sacrificing their job.
Sure.
That's all I have.
Okay, so, general consensus here, amongst the group here, are we okay with going to the next step?
Yes.
Going to the next step here, I know that we have some concerns about what's, specifics in here. But we could have another budget workshop on October 23rd, which would answer questions. If we need to have that, is there consensus we need that or not?
Do we need to find out more about the SRO?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. Is that okay or not? On the SRO?
Yes.
This is quick. Paul, you said 42 grand from the Grafton School District?
Roughly, yeah,
Okay, which leaves how much for us?
top of my head,
That's all I need.
Let's look.
Yeah,
We'll find it.
my best guess would be between 65,000.
From the village?
Correct.
Additional 65.
Correct.
Okay,
But we'll firm that up and, but you know,
Okay.
either at
that's all I
the
need.
23rd or the public
Okay, very
hearing.
good. So what follow-ups do we need here? We need to follow up on the SRO?
Yep.
Okay, and anything else here that we need to follow up on?
I'd certainly like some consideration for some of the money to go back into the fire department. On the top line from tax revenue, because I know they got a little bit of a grant, but if we don't get, if that doesn't pass in the spring, if that referendum doesn't pass, they have less money. And we're looking at what the heck do we do? That's what I would ask.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Next step here, you want to have do we need to have a budget workshop too? Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yes, but absent.
Okay, so we close out this, we'll come back for a budget workshop number 2, October 23rd. If we can get as many of the questions that we have outstanding on the budget to Jesse, so we can have those to be answered for that meeting. We really appreciate it. So with that, I'll have motion to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting.
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, does anybody need a quick break here?
Yeah.
Okay, take a 5-minute break here, and again, to those who are here for the 6 o'clock